do you know Paul Beelan, who was the former Westmeath manager? I encountered him when he was the Grey Cullen manager in Laois. I was only 16, and I went up and I asked him for a team before the game, and he told me to fuck off and come back when I had some hair on my chest.
And you still haven't gone back to him yet, have you?
I have.
I had exactly the same story. The head of sport in RTÉ when I went in 1994. So in 1993, I met him for the first time, and he said to me, "Look, I think you've got great enthusiasm, and you've clearly got ability, and you're completely committed." And I said, "But I want you to do me a favour." And I said, "Sure, whatever you want me to do." And he said, "I want you to fuck off and come back when you can grow."
Didn't know that was
At least I'm not the only one. It might be a rite of passage. Who knows?
I didn't know that was a requirement for RTÉ that you needed to be.
No, you just need to be able to grow.
Able to grow in. Yeah.
It's like my new clearing. This is my this is my payment for.
Oh, Tony got you that, did he?
Yeah, my payment for collecting them from the airport last night.
Okay.
So you guys are all commuting. You're going home every weekend. You're going home every weekend.
Yeah.
Where are you
I'm
from?
from Cavan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
Do not tell.
Yeah, Gavin from Cavan, we get a lot of mileage on that. Yeah, we all go home for work.
And you're all working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have to.
Is this a good place to be? Like, do you like being here?
Yeah. Well, this isn't his first time in college.
Yeah.
I went to Galway I did 2 years of a 3-year degree in NUIG, and I did English 90. I was doing arts,
right.
So but just completely different in terms of college life. Just the whole, I suppose, perception of college life here compared to Galway. Galway is very much it's my favourite place in the world, but it's not the most studious. It's really not.
Is it not?
No, like there's
a real atmosphere down there.
There is, but
like there's a proper university atmosphere. And
but there's not the emphasis on, like, say, the likes of society life. It's not a thing in Galway. Whereas here,
is it not?
No. Whereas here, like, we could be in 4, 5, 6 different. We'd have our hands in a couple of different pots.
Yeah.
But
I have to say, from talking to my friends who go to the likes of WIT, UCC, UL and all that, society life isn't something that is promoted as, let's say, here.
Right.
Like here they have the massive clubs and socks fair at the start where all the colleges set up stalls and you get to see what different societies are on offer, join whichever ones you have.
Is that unique to here, or would that?
I don't think it's unique to here.
UCD probably has a strong enough.
Probably
I'd
does,
say so.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Dublin thing then, but yeah, no, I have to say from the colleges that I've heard about, there's certainly society life is much more promoted here than it is in other.
Like there's a big mix of people here as well from all over.
Yeah. Like it is a very diverse.
UCD I have a sense is a bit South County Dublin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're bang on the money.
In the heart of it, just beside.
No, but that tends to be there's not an awful lot of people coming from Leisure, Offaly, or in Cork.
The ag, with the exception of the ag course in UCD,
right? Okay.
That brings the country boys. Really does.
Up in the Massey Ferguson.
See the John Deere's driving.
Into
you don't know whether it's Sean O'Brien or who the Leinster boys are training.
Sean O'Brien would pull his tractor into the UCD. He wouldn't.
Well, not in his current state.
Unfortunately so.
That just reminds me, Gavin.
Yes.
You too.
Who's going to do it?
Oh, on silent.
Yeah.
Very good. See, we are professional in certain aspects. Yeah.
We do try.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get started. And you can.
For me.
Bring us in.
For me.
Yeah. Go on.
See, I always say live because I'm used to saying live.
We're not live.
We're not live anymore.
No.
So we used to do this as a radio show.
Right.
Initially. And now
it's podcast.
Now it's podcast. Just
yeah.
the nature of, we're working around people's schedules. So we upload on Friday and whatever, but we're not live anymore. And I have to keep telling myself that.
Yeah.
Good morning and welcome to In Conversation With. We are coming to you from the U in DCU once again. My name is Greg. I'm joined here by my co-host Colin McDonald.
Hey, Greg.
Gavin Kelly.
How you doing?
What are you looking at? We are here today in the presence of a very, very familiar voice. Of Irish Rugby, none other than Ryle Nugent. Ryle, thank you very much for coming in today.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you.
Were you travelling far today?
No, not far at all. I live over in Blackrock on the south side.
On the south side.
Across the city, though.
Across the city. No, it's not too bad.
We had
this time of the morning.
our guest. We had a guest yesterday who took their longest trip from there to us. Jared Canning came from Cork to meet us yesterday.
Jared's a good man, isn't he?
Yeah, very good.
He is. He had a couple of tales for us already.
Very enjoyable.
But yeah. as tradition goes, I'll ask you, Ryle, what was your initial thought when I approached you to be on the show?
Oh, you get asked when you're doing this. I'm sure Jared probably gave a similar answer. When you do what we do, people have, I guess, some sort of innate interest in why you do it and how you go about doing it, and people make contact and ask you, can they talk to you about it? And I said to one of you, I can't remember, when we were walking up here, like, we've all been in this position where we were starting out in our careers, or we were in college and we were trying to figure out exactly what to do and how to do it, and we asked people at the time to help us along. So like I without wanting to sound like I'm some sort of saint, when somebody asks you to do them a favour, and you
patron saint of Irish media for us.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's not exactly a massive ask.
Yeah,
come out and talk about sport.
It is the consensus answer that people have been where we are now, starting out, trying to break it into the industry, and they are willing to help out as much as they can.
And I would always hope it'll be that, and I hope you guys, no doubt you guys will do it when your turn comes. But I guess
I don't know about Greg. Greg has a few notions about, like, you see, he's wearing a scarf today.
Oh, come on. My face is still swollen. I had a root canal yesterday, right?
Did you?
I did, yeah. And I had my root canal at 10 o'clock yesterday morning. I got out of there about 11:30, and I hopped in the car and I came straight to Dublin to interview Ger Canning.
Fantastic.
See, commitment to
Hang
the
on a
cause.
second, there's a problem here. I have a problem with the student with the car.
No,
Technically his own.
I did. It worked out quite well yesterday. My dad and my brother were in London visiting my uncle.
You stole the car.
I stole the car and I justified it. I said, see, this way you won't have to get the bus home. So I can give you the car out at the airport and you can toddle on home. And it worked out well for everyone.
Son.
On your initial reaction to coming on the show and such, what did you take from the wording of the email? Did you like that? Did you get a little?
Yeah, it was a novel approach.
Okay, novel approach.
But you know what? I tell you what. I've had this conversation with a couple of other guys who are around my age, which is mid 40s. I'm going to hold on mid 40s, quite not to late 40s. Yeah. Is that we were lucky when we were starting out, when we were doing what you guys are doing. There was a massive change in the broadcast landscape in Ireland. So up until the early 90s, there were very few options. There was RTÉ, and then there was pretty much the pirate radio scene, which was everybody in power seemed to be turning a blind eye to. Anyway, without going into too many details about it and boring you to death, what happened was it all got legislated. So I went to Ballyfermot Senior College to do broadcasting and journalism. And it was the first time the course had been run, and they had seen a hole in the market, which was licensed radio, legal radio around the country was going to come to the market, and there weren't the people to fill the jobs with any sort of experience. So I went into Ballyfermot Senior College, and it was a 2-year broadcasting journalism course, and by the time I got to the end of the first year, I think there were 40 of us on that course. Every one of us had a job before we'd even left.
Wow, amazing.
So in that class was Damien O'Reilly, who's done Countrywide for years and well known in RTÉ, Justin Tracy, who's sports news in RTÉ, myself, and many others who have gone on to do other things both in Ireland and around the country or around the world. So we were blessed. Like we didn't realise it at the time, but we walked into an industry that was just really beginning and taking off. So I left Ballyfermot and I walked straight into 98 FM. It was in its first year, and they were looking for people, and what the course gave us was an ability to have. They had radio studio and they had a TV studio. So you didn't walk into a radio studio and go. It wasn't theoretical. It was practical. So you understood how to work the systems before you even went in. So it was an easy transition. And I now look at you guys, and guys doing that in different colleges and technical courses around the country, and it's so much harder. Like you were, sorry to say this, but you're competing against each other. Yeah. You're competing against people, the rest of the guys and girls in your class, and people coming from other places around the country. So it's much harder. So when somebody comes and says, can you give us a dig out? I go, absolutely. It's much tougher for you guys than it was for me.
Our favourite one is probably Ian Dempsey. when we asked him this question, you know, what was the initial reaction? He said, well, you know, one day you lads could be my boss.
He's right.
So,
touching on that, I think there is, maybe not the exact same amount, there is a similar amount of opportunities, it's just how much they'll pay you. So there's a lot of...
It's like they didn't pay well when I started either. Like, let's call it.
Yeah, okay.
Like it was not... My recollection of that is one of the first jobs I had. There was a competition in rugby called the Belvedere Floodlit Cup, which was a Leinster competition, and it was kind of a new competition in that they played it under lights on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night in Belvedere in Agassi Road, and it was for all the senior clubs in Leinster. And 98 FM used to take live coverage or update coverage of those matches on a Tuesday night, and I got the job of doing the live report. So you do a live report into, I'm going from memory now, the 7 o'clock news, the 8 o'clock news, the 9 o'clock news, and the 10 o'clock news, with the final report in the 10 o'clock news. And my memory of that is I was getting paid, I think it was €8 a match. So let's not like it was £8 at the time.
Yeah.
£8 it was. God, I'm old. But you know, like, so like we weren't all walking into, we didn't all walk in and go, where's the 100 grand job, lads?
There was probably a degree of security though to the fact that there, you know, if 98 FM didn't work out with the industry boom, you could have moved, you know, somewhere else.
Well, look, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There was an absolute security.
Yeah.
It never crossed my mind that I was going to find it hard to get a job in the industry. It crossed my mind that I mightn't be good enough. Crossed my mind that I mightn't progress to the level I wanted to progress. All those things, all those insecurities and worries were there. But was there the process by which I could get and start a career? That never crossed my mind, and I think that's really hard for people now because I think it is much more competitive. And just in the sheer volume, you guys have got guys and girls a year ahead of you or 2 years ahead of you who will be out in the market ahead of you, and there's a volume of people coming through, whether it's communications degrees or broadcast degrees or journalism degrees or whatever, it might even arts degrees or English degrees that end up turning that way. It's harder. I don't try to put you off. It's fabulous, and I think you're dead right doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, one thing students do now, like this podcasting gig on the radio we were doing, it actually isn't built into our course.
Yeah.
It's all extracurricular through society. So people we know people working in RTÉ Pulse now, and they're really doing it by themselves now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. You've got to show initiative.
Yeah.
Like you've got to show that you're fully committed. But I think that goes with any career now. I think there's no way you're just going to waltz into any degree course and waltz out the far side and kind of go, I've arrived in the street, give me a job. You know, like you've got to show any potential employer that you're committed, you're diligent, you're hardworking, and then on top of that, then you got to have the talent. And that again, whether that's journalism or whether that's communications or whether that's health, whether it's law, you still have to have the talent and the ability and in order to drive your career. But yeah, I get what you're doing and I understand what you're doing and good on you for doing it.
I have to, and like within our own course there is 100 odd or so, and like without blowing our own trumpet around like that,
we're better than everybody else.
we are the only ones doing this specifically, and that was something that surprised me when we started out. And I'm not going to say it was easy making contact with people in the industry. Initially it wasn't, but once I got the hang of it and got a knack for it.
Once we got a couple of names, it was easier to attract other names. You know, like when we could turn to you and say, right, well, we've done Ian Dempsey, we've done Joe Duff, you know.
But you know what? And you name Ian and you name Joe, and they're two really good examples. I think the vast majority of people in all walks of life are decent. Like they are.
I just don't think
they get sometimes their reputations, and not particularly, not clearly not those two, but people's reputations get muddied in social media, and everybody goes, oh, he or she is a But you know, the chances are they're maybe on an issue they might have been, but in general, I find see the good in most people. You're too young.
We haven't had a negative response to us. Anyone we've approached or anything, nobody has outright said no. The worst we've had is maybe talk to us after the new year, talk to us a couple of months down the road,
And everybody wishes us luck and stuff like that. What I was going to say was I was just surprised that not to my knowledge, has anybody, particularly of our age, done something like this where we've reached out to personalities in Irish media, asked for interviews, and then just gone and done it. And it's going really well for us now. We're getting the interviews, and it became as a surprise to me that I didn't. The ease to which we were able to actually find the interviews, but then having.
Yeah, but I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So you get the interviews, but are people listening?
That is the other.
This is the next. This is no. Fair question.
Because getting people in a room is one thing. What you do with them when you get them in the room, and whether that engages with an audience.
Yeah, this is the next step, and we are taking steps towards it to expand our audience.
We've recently got on all major podcasting platforms. So I think we're on 10 different platforms. 9.
Yeah, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
So that is helping. It was the case that we were strictly SoundCloud and then Apple Podcasts. And so now we're on 10. I think I'm pretty sure it's 10.
And you've driven that all by yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we've put a bit of our own money into it, promoting posts on social media and stuff like that. And so if you know any sponsors,
right, sure. We'll get into what we're here for, which is the man himself. So the first question I want to ask is, Ryle, you're originally from Ballyfermot?
No, I'm not from Ballyfermot.
You're not originally from Ballyfermot.
So you did your research by reading the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, well, see, we like to fact check Wikipedia as well.
So we fact check Wikipedia. What I can tell you is that the last time I checked my Wikipedia page, which was probably just after I left RTÉ, there were more falsehoods in that Wikipedia, which made me laugh out loud.
We like to fact check our Wikipedia sources just to see how accurate and inaccurate they are.
So I went to college in Ballyfermot. To my third level in college.
But you did go to Blackrock, so
I went to Blackrock.
As I said to Colin this morning, I was like, if he was from Ballyfermot, I don't think he would have went to Blackrock.
I also didn't climb Mount Everest.
Oh, the first Irish man we did spot that.
Where do you think that came out?
My partner is not male.
Jack Keeley.
No, that's not true either.
Where does this come from?
Somebody had a bit of fun.
Somebody who's having a good
who likes to take the piss.
Expense. Yeah. And I have absolutely zero issue with it until actually worrying people like you might actually think it's true.
Who was it? We're interviewing Rick O'Shea on Thursday. And Rick in the email just literally said, "Do not look at Wikipedia."
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great.
I know Wikipedia is awful, but unfortunately, now, I think this is something that we've found is that doing research on particularly Irish media personalities, there isn't an extensive amount of information that we can gather to go into the interview. Now, the point of the interview is to learn about the guest, of course, but there isn't a few things like Greg, God bless him now, is a very good investigative journalist. He gets his little tidbits that actually throws the guest off by how he's found it, but there isn't a whole host of information that we can gather coming into the interview itself. I just don't think
a lot of it is
we like to draw it out of you.
Yeah,
a lot of it is usually interviews done with the person.
Existing interviews
from
with
years back or maybe
such,
recently, but a few and far between.
We recycle slightly. So, Ryle, was it on the cards? What did you want to be as a child?
What did I want to be as a child?
Everyone wanted to be the fireman.
No, I don't have a recollection. That was part of the reason I ended up in doing what I'm doing now. I didn't have that thing where I was a kid that I wanted to drive a fire engine, or I wanted to be a doctor or a nurse, or I wanted to be an engineer. There was nothing that I really wanted to be, and that was part of the problem. So I kind of meandered my way through my secondary school education, and Blackrock College was a terrific place to go. I was concentrated on sport as a kid, so I swam competitively through my teens, which meant my days were very regimented. So I got up
an early start, I'd say, as well. Yeah,
at 5 or 5:30 every morning. My dad, God bless him, got me out of the bed, and we drove out to Glenalbyn swimming pool in Stillorgan, and I would have trained there from, I can't remember exactly, it was 6 to 7:45, and then I got out of the pool and had my breakfast in the kitchen there, and walked down from Stillorgan to Blackrock, and went to school until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then played rugby or soccer in my last year or two after school, and then walked back up to Stillorgan and went training again, and got home at 7:30 or 8 o'clock and did an hour, if I even did an hour, and went to bed and got up at 5 o'clock and did that and repeat for about 5 years.
So you swam competitively. Was professional career ever in your mindset?
No, unfortunately.
You did represent Ireland.
Yeah, I swam very good. I well from you. Look, you did.
See, he's
yeah,
good.
That's what I'm with I swam for Irish schools. Yeah. And I had ambitions of going to major championships, but the truth of the matter was, no matter how well I'd gone, I was blessed, or not, I was cursed with one thing you can't have as a swimmer, which is I have small hands. And you know what they say about a man with small hands? He's not going to go to an Olympics.
That's how the saying goes.
I'm pretty sure that's not the one that my dad told.
But yeah, no. So I did that the whole way through, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So my mum was a massive influence in my life because she was the first female managing director of a media outlet in the country. She was the managing director of the Sunday Tribune first, and then she was she owned the Sunday Business Post with Aileen O'Toole and Damien Kybert, and so she was involved in media, and I had a kind of, now looking back, insane engagement with the media that I took for granted, which was going into offices and seeing Vincent Brown and Paul Kimmage and Eamon Dunphy and all these guys who were at the top of their game, and David Walsh, and Kimmage came later, but David Walsh, and like these guys were the best in the business, and I was around them, and I guess it kind of somehow subconsciously came a part of my being, and I was deeply interested in sport, having played rugby and soccer and swum, and it all came together. And then I came to Leaving Cert, and frankly I did awfully in my Leaving Cert the first time around, and then frankly I repeated my leaving and did awfully a second time.
You repeated in Blackrock?
No, I repeated in the Institute of Leeson Street.
Yeah.
And my parents were kind of looking at me going, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? And then the media course came available, and I got drawn to it. And then I went from nowhere to knowing exactly what I wanted to do I remember walking into Ballyfermot, I would say 48 hours after I walked into the place and saw the radio studio and saw the TV studio and was around it, I went, this is what I want to do. So I went from nowhere to knowing definitively, and I'm not sure everybody at 18 or 19, they may think they know what they want to do, they may have interest in it, I'm not sure they're actually hooked in from the day that they start, but from the day I started I went, this is me, media is where I want to be.
I think I went from like definitive to definitive to definitive. I always switched.
Did you?
So
yeah,
Colin actually...
if we're going to go the whole hog, like I started off, I wanted to do physiotherapy because I said it was sport, like much like yourself, sport all the way up.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't good enough to be an athlete. So
small hands.
Not even just not that athletically gifted. I'm not bad at hurling and soccer now, but
I've seen him around. He's not the best for a man wearing a Waterford jersey. Leave my glass knee alone.
So physiotherapy was the first protocol, and then quickly changed to journalism. But the reason I wanted to do journalism was because a lot of sports commentators and analysts did start as and are journalists.
Yep.
And sports commentary was something I wanted to go into, like what you've been doing, and I thought that was the dream job, going to matches, just commentating on, getting to give your thoughts on matches and get paid for it. Couldn't be better.
The dream.
But then I quickly realised the workload that's in journalism, and I went into fifth year then, and I started doing economics and had quite an knack for it. It was my best subject in secondary school. So I decided economics might be the career path. So originally I had economics and German and Trinity down as my first choice, but I didn't get that, thankfully so now. And then second choice was economics, politics and law here in DCU, which I got. And
our misfortune.
Yeah, well...
wait for the next part.
So the first day was grand, all economics and politics lectures, and I was like, this is really interesting, can get on board with this. Second day was all law lectures, and I came crashing back down to reality with the amount of workload that they were describing and what I'd have to be doing study-wise and stuff like that. Like I'm not unstudious, but again, I do like my free time, and it didn't seem like I was going to get a lot from this course. So
you're really selling this.
So I went out that night and met up with a friend from home that's also in DCU doing communications, and she was describing communications, and it was all media and stuff like that. And she was like, "Oh yeah, it's great. Like 12 hours a week. The lectures are very interesting." I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." Had a bit of a bad night. Well, good night, but a bad morning after. I suppose
way more information.
I really wish, like, we know that your mum and dad like listen. And Shane, I'm really sorry if you're listening to this.
Woke up and missed all my lectures and went in and decided, you know what, I'm going to switch to communications. So that was the Wednesday, and I was in communications by Thursday. And then now, from definitively wanted to do physiotherapy to journalism to economics in some capacity, I'm back into the media field and like.
Yeah, but the media field can have economics involved.
It can, but not for me. Now I have my.
Someone's never going to be group head of RTÉ Sport.
Now I have kind of my sights set on a career in radio or some sort of.
It's funny. So. Like I came in with obviously I'd done a bit of freelance sports reporting and news as well for a couple of years, and I kind of firmly had myself set as I'm going to be a print digital journalist. But I came to CCU and we started doing a bit of radio. Loved it.
Yeah.
Never thought I would have.
No, I never thought I'd be interested in radio. I always thought journalism or some of the media, maybe video, TV. And then we started doing this. And here we are.
Radio and especially podcasting is just such a handy medium, really. It's a lot more laid back than what TV
It gives
is.
people a forum, that some people that maybe shouldn't have a forum, but it does give us a forum. Ryle, back to your time at 98 FM. So
Sure.
you were on the news desk, is where you started.
I was on the news desk. Yeah, I started. Aidan Cooney was the head of sport at the time, our man Aidan Cooney, as the catchphrase at the time, and Aidan took me on, and I owe him a huge debt of gratitude. And as I was working for 98 FM, so I was a sports reporter and on the desk, so I'd be, depending shift, one day you'd be out in the field, but more often than not you were in the studio. And at the same time, Dara Maloney was doing the same job for FM 104 that I was doing for 98 FM. So Darren and I started together, and we used to invariably, if it was an Irish rugby match or an Irish soccer match, we ended up working the same beat, and we became friendly because when we again remember it was a different time.
How was that looked upon? I suppose wasn't it
so
competitive?
when we walked into the first sort of rugby press conferences or going to games, like were we young by comparison. So we would have been in our, what age were we at that point? 23, 24, and Dara's a year or two younger than me, and we were walking into what was then just the news journalists, and the news journalists were Irish Times, Irish Independent, Irish Press, maybe the Examiner, and that was it. There was no 42 Joe, balls like that. They didn't exist, so there was no RT.ie, there was no nothing like that. So it was like there were a group of 4 guys who used to go and had complete control over it, and then of course it was the RT, either Jim Sherman or Fred Cogley, and then myself and Maloney, and we were, God, did we cling on to each other forever, because it was tough, like it was tough breaking in, and in fairness to the guys that were there, the journalists that were there at the time, they were, including Ned Van Esbeck, who's still going strong. I only saw him last week in the press box, but like he was the Irish Times rugby correspondent, and they were very decent to us, and they didn't have to be.
Wasn't necessarily a closed circle as such, so.
Well, it was a pretty closed circle, but they didn't close it tight, and they didn't behave in a way that could have intimidated us. But it was intimidating. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, so we did 98 FM, and so that was what, 90, I'm going to go say 92 to 93, and then 94 came along, and RTE advertised for a new young people's sports programme, and they were looking for presenters, and I went and auditioned for that, and I hope those audition tapes never show up.
This is the great,
yeah. Cannot tell you how bad the audition was, but I kind of had a sense that I was going to be okay, because there was only, and again, my numbers might be slightly out here, but the audition, there were maybe only 3 or 4 guys were asked to audition for it, and there were at least 20 girls that were asked to audition for it. So my and I knew they were going to take on a boy and a girl, so my odds were decent from the outside.
Felt like you were down in Pats there.
Yeah. And so look, it worked, and I got into that with Sarah O'Flaherty, who was the girl that was chosen at the time, and we did that, and I was only in RTÉ. That was coming out of the young people's department. I was only in RTÉ maybe 3 months, and the sports department picked me up to do the live Sunday night's results show, a sports results show, which was called Sunday Sport on TV after the news at 9 o'clock. And I found myself in a 6-month period with this television career that I kind of didn't see that coming. 98 FM were very good. They let me go with their blessing, and again, Aidan Cooney was incredibly good to me when I was leaving, and I was just blessed. Like, I was so lucky. I mean, and again, got to understand, like, I had literally no training for live TV, like literally none. My very first time sitting in a studio was the first bulletin, or the first program that we did, which was with Jim Sherman was presenting, and I was the co-presenter is overstating it. I was reading the results. We're doing the news roundup at the end of the program, and I have it on tape, and this is gospel truth. So the news, it was in the same studio as the 9 o'clock news. So the 9 o'clock news people came out. They then, in the commercial break, pulled a new drape around the back of the studio, and the Sunday Sport team came in. So I'm now sitting there, first time in a live studio, 4 minutes into a commercial break, and I am in absolute bits, thinking, what am I doing here? Like, no part of me wanted to be there all of a sudden. So anyway, all right, you'll get through it. And Jim Sherman says, and here with the results of the day is Ryle Nugent, and I launched into it. I was at 150 miles an hour. I'm at 100 miles an hour all the time, but I was at least half speed more. And I was going at it, and I have this on video, and it is video, like it was on that VHS. So the results from the Premiership that day were, and I ran through the results. So I'm going 2-0, 3-1, 4-6, and the games are running into each other. I'm going so quickly, and then I have this earpiece in, and I hear in my ear Ryle, and if you look on the tape, it's Manchester United 2, yes. And then I go Crystal Palace 0, or whatever it was. And I'm thinking, and then we go to a VT, and the director comes on and he said, Ryle, the next time I call your name, you don't answer me. I was like, oh my God. So it was like
baptism of fire.
But that, like, I got away with it. I mean, again, it was a different time. People were judged in a different way. There's no way somebody would be put on the air as raw as I was at the time. But he stuck with me, and over the years I got huge opportunities. I did 4 years of the Grip, which was a great grounding. It started off very much as a kids, like aimed at 7, 8, 9-year-olds, and it developed as the years went by. So by the time we were finishing after 4 years, it was very much aimed at teenagers, like, as in it was a student, it had more of a studenty feel off it. We got some wonderful opportunities. We were around the world. The female presenter changed. Sally came in, Sally McCardle, who at the time was the world kickboxing champion, and we got to do stuff that like we were all over the world. It was all over Europe and a bit outside of that. So we were in the States, and we got to go to Asia, and I got to ride a bobsleigh down a run in Austria. I got to, which was a phenomenal experience. I got to abseil, and I got to scuba dive, and I did a water ski jump with no training. We did the most insane things. Like, it was just wonderful. We were skiing. We were like, I was literally living the dream. So I was 24, 25 at this point, and man, was I having a good time. Like,
you might not have climbed Everest, but you're definitely an adrenaline junkie anyways.
Well, and that wasn't who I was, so it was completely against type, and that was kind of what the show liked doing, was putting me in places that the producers knew I had.
I've never seen it, but I'm just picturing an idiot abroad.
Yeah,
you know.
So there was a very slight bang of that on.
He's not calling you an idiot now.
No.
Carl Belvedere, you like, if we're on the same
page. A bit of
page.
an idiot to say I'll water ski and jump with no training.
No training.
Yeah, I'll do that. Idiot. Like, that is an idiot thing to do. But yeah, look, so it was great. But that ran its natural course. They wanted it to go on. I felt I'd gone as far as I could go, and I was repeating it, and I was conscious. There's a very fine line as well when you're doing kids programs and you're at a certain age. The transition into adult programming is you've got to be careful that you haven't undermined your credibility so far.
Did you ever feel that you had painted yourself with that brush?
I had a real sense that I was beginning to do that. Whether that was true or not didn't matter. Everybody around me, as in the producer and my parents and my brothers and my friends, all had different views on it, and I didn't really listen to any of them because I felt, and I thought, you know what, you're going to have to, if you're going to move across, you need to move across, and you've got to cut this. And actually it finished, and a new program came out of it immediately the year after, which was Rapid, which was Catherine Thomas and Jason Sherlock, and they took it on for 3 or 4 years, and they started their careers doing that. But for me, it was time to cut it, and the sports department were keen for me to come in full time.
But that's quite unheard of in RTÉ. It would have been to move between departments at the time now, and I know it's not a strictly moving department because
it was one was coming out of young people's and one was coming out of sports, so it was a move.
Well, it was a young people's sport oriented.
Yeah, sure.
But I suppose it is still a moving department.
It was.
From what we've gathered from our previous guests and stuff, it is quite unheard of and quite unusual to move between.
It was unusual. Like I said, I will openly say I have had enormous slices of luck in my career. Whether I have an ability and talent, that's for other people to judge. I would say I have a semblance of both, but in terms of, do I feel like I've been lucky along the way? Have I been lucky from the day I decided what I wanted to do, where I sort of fell into Ballyfermot, and it gave me opportunities, to the 98 thing, to the kids show in RTÉ, to the moving into the sports department, and then in '99 the Rugby World Cup came along, and the head of sport, who was a huge impact on my life at the time, a guy called Tim O'Connor, he said he had a huge impact on my career. They had the '99 World Cup, Rugby World Cup, and he knew that they were going to need 4 commentators, and they only had 3, and the 3 were Jim Sherwin, Fred Cogley, and George Hamilton, and they knew on one day that they needed.
They couldn't. I read something about this.
And he saw this 6 months out, and he said, "I want you to try being a commentator." And I had never even crossed. The only person who'd ever said to me, "I think you could be a commentator," was my dad. Everybody, no one else. I hadn't thought about it, and I kind of said to Dad, "Yeah, it's too. I don't think I have what it takes." And Tim said, "I think you do," and he made me go down and take an old tape out, and he sat me down, and I tried to commentate, and he brought me into the office the next day and said that was genuinely awful, it was truly appalling, but you had the, I'm going to say, balls to do it, and that is going to tell you something about yourself. Now go back and try again. And over a couple of months we did it, and then in 1999 I got put on my first live game.
Romania and
Georgia was a game that wasn't broadcast in Ireland. It needed a commentator for a world feed. RTÉ didn't show it. So that was on the Saturday. The first live game on RTÉ was either on a Tuesday or a Wednesday afternoon when England were playing Fiji in Twickenham. And Ralph Keyes was the co-commentator, and I got my first opportunity. And I was sick again. My nerves were gone. I was smoking like a trooper. I was drinking coffee till it was coming out my ears. I was in the ground I think the game was kicking off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in the ground at 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was sitting in the commentary position with the headphones on, rehearsing my opening, "Thank you very much and welcome to," and I was like, and I got to a point where an hour before the game I had drunk so much coffee and smoked so many cigarettes that I literally vomited from the nerves. Ridiculous.
Now, we like our coffee here, but I don't think we'd ever.
No, I drank myself. I was wound up, completely wound up.
Do you remember how many coffees?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. It was intravenous. I was on a drip of coffee. It was caffeine drip.
When I went to, I made my debut in the Croke Park press box over the summer,
right.
And it was Leinster semi-final, Laois and Carlow, not exactly a massive fixture or anything, but I was in awe. This is where I had wanted to get to since I had started.
Absolutely.
On a sideline in January in Laois somewhere.
And how nervous were you?
Oh my, Ryle, I can't even describe to you. I was a puppy. I have a friend who works for a rival newspaper in Laois, but I went up to him, I texted him the night before and I said, "I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to follow you around," because my editor was on holidays. He said, "Look, to get from the press area down to the dressing rooms in Croke Park," he said, "it's long, it's a meandering kind of thing, you'll get lost." He said,
"Follow someone.
For the love of God, hang on to his ankles." And but I got in, like yourself, I got in a couple hours early, I was all set, arrived in, and I sat in the wrong area. Yeah. I sat down in the broadcasting with the monitors and stuff, and I got heaved out, and that was a bit embarrassing, as it would be. And then I had to try and get a programme. I had this awful thing about asking the nice old man that goes around with the programmes. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I got my programme and everything, and like yourself, I went and I got myself some coffee, and I went out to the smoking area, and I had about 3 fags, and I went in and I was like, okay, I'm composed. And then someone came up and asked me something, and I was just all over the shop again. And I had to repeat the process. Coffee and a cigarette. I came back in and I was like, I can do this. But it was fine, and it's literally just getting yourself caught up.
Sure, yeah, it's there's a bit of jumping into the unknown, and you've got to, like, if you're going to do this, whether it's in the written word, because the written word is a completely different discipline, but it has become hugely pressurised. Look at those guys that have got to write reports. Doesn't matter whether it's gas, soccer, rugby, doesn't matter what it is, and they're on the whistle reports. And you know as well as I do, some of those games go right to the whistle, and they can go either way, and they've got to have 1,000 words or 800 words or whatever it is written. Like, there's a huge pressure in that. The immediacy of written journalism is caught up with broadcast in terms of having to perform there and then. And that's what the rugby commentary did. It was something in the back of my head just said, like, the next 80 minutes you're on your own, kid. So, like, you've got there's only two things that are going to happen here. Either you're going to work your way through the next 80 minutes, or you're going to fall silent and your career is done. It's over. So
or even got going, you know.
So we got through it.
Would you say it was your best, your finest performance of the night?
I had a fright of my life as well. Like, I mean, now that when I look back at it, it was like, I'll digress for a second. It is much, much, much easier to do Ireland against New Zealand this week than it would be to do Blackrock against Cork Con in an AIL match, because there's so much information there, and I know all the players, so I don't have to worry about that. The basic job, part of the commentary, is identification of players. That's the first and foremost thing, and you take that for granted. But when you're doing a match, when you have never seen any of the players, and there are 46 names on a sheet, and I don't know what anybody looks like, it is a far, far bigger ask for a commentator to do a game at a much lower level of visibility than it is to do a World Cup final or a Six Nations match or an All-Ireland final. Like, that's, for a commentator, that's that part of it is already taken out because it's already in your head. Then it's about performance, then it's about writing the atmosphere and all those things. But just to finish out that, I got Fiji. And Fiji, I can remember one of the names was Tika Mamakogai was playing on the wing, and there was another guy. There were 6 names on it that were tongue twisters, and I was just trying to get through the game without. And then you're thinking, who's going to tell you pronounce Tika Mamakogai correctly? But that's not the point. Like, you're
social media these days, I'm sure somebody.
Oh, you better believe it. That's a whole different conversation. So we did all that, and I back to the tying it into the look. So that was '99, and then Fred Cogley retired in 2002, and then George had been sent into Soccer World and really wasn't commentating on rugby on a week in, week out, and the organisation had made a conscious decision at that point. Really, it needed a lead rugby commentator and a lead soccer commentator, and there were going to be weekends where George couldn't do both, so he was sort of pushed down he still did rugby, but he was never going to be able to lead it every week. Yeah. And if it was a choice, George was being pushed at soccer. And so Jim Sherwin took over the lead rugby commentator's gig, and he was well into his 60s at that point, having sat behind Fred for a long time. And that's where I say I got lucky. So here we were again. I got pushed into doing commentary when I really didn't want to do it. Kind of bluffed and blagged my way to the point of just about getting away with it. Had the room to refine it over the next couple of years. And then I hit 2006. 2004, I'm in as the number 2 commentator on the Six Nations. In 2006, Jim's gone on retirement, and 2006 is how many years ago? That's 11 years ago, so I'm now 35 or 34, and I'm the lead commentator on RTÉ, and I'm thinking... And
Deputy Head of Sport.
Not at that point.
Oh.
Not at that point. But I'm thinking, wow, how the hell did that happen? and that's where I'm saying you get luck. You know, you get lucky, and you look at pound for pound. For me, Darren Maloney, probably the best commentator in these islands. As a commentator, I think he's outstanding. And he went into soccer commentary, and he found himself behind another outstanding commentator in George Hamilton. So Darren was never way more ability, way more talent, just came in behind a guy who was at the peak of his career and had another 15 years in front of him. And Dara subsequently is kind of half shifted into being a great presenter as well. Yeah. So talent, ability, and
timing.
Immaculate.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. Now, you said that player identification is a big part of, the major part of commentary. There was one moment where you identified a certain player in a certain way that garnered a lot of national attention back in 2009.
That was excellent. That was
and it became, so subsequently through the likes of Gift Grub and stuff like that, it became a national a joke, but not in a laughing at, certainly a laughing with joke.
There's no way anybody's going to say that. I like laughing with. The one thing I'll say, if you're going to go and be a broadcaster and you're going to put yourself in the public domain and then you're going to take offence if people take the mickey out of you, then don't go.
And I don't think it's taking the mickey because it was a fantastic and iconic piece of Irish sporting history when, obviously, if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, Tommy Bowe going over for the try against Wales in the Grand Slam game back in 2009. It was an iconic moment in sports history, and you have your mark on that now in a very good way, I think, actually.
It's very kind of you to say it, but look, I going back to the commentary, I think commentators' job first and foremost is to make sure that they can identify the players, and then for me it's about trying to live the emotion of the viewer.
It's entertainment as well.
Living the emotion of the viewer, right? So when you're doing that on an international match, it's really easy to do that because 99% of RTÉ's audience wanted Ireland to win.
Yeah.
So I without
you're allowed to be slightly biased.
No, not slightly biased. I would say I would have said it was biased, but it was biased in a positive and a negative sense of focusing on Ireland. It was a focus on Ireland because that's where the vast majority of the audience were. The trick down from that was, I remember doing the Munster-Leinster semi-final of the Heineken Cup where Rohan O'Gara jumped over the boards. I don't know whether you remember, and Munster beat Leinster in Lansdowne Road and they absolutely annihilated them. And that was probably the trickiest game I was most worried about going into because you're going to get slaughtered by both sides. But actually I made a decision, if I get slaughtered by both sides, I've probably done my job. So if the Leinster supporters think I was red and the Munster supporters think I was blue,
then you were somewhere in the middle.
Then I was somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky one. But it is about trying to harness that emotional engagement for the viewer. So when you're at an international level, you can do that relatively easy. If you work for the BBC or you work for Sky in the UK, that's a little harder if you're doing
because you have Scotland, Wales, and
right. So now you can't, and I think sometimes that Sky, not any individual commentator, can become very English focused and forget that they're also broadcasting into Scotland.
I tend to agree.
Right. So now I'm commentating for Channel 4. I've got to pull back the greenness of what I do because
hard if Jamie's sitting beside you as well.
Yeah, but I still think there is going to be the majority of the audience are going to be focused on Ireland, but you cannot go as green as you could when RTÉ. So it's understanding where the audience is and then trying to take them on the emotional part of that journey. So the Tommy Bowe thing just happened. Like I have never written anything down for a lead into a break. I got accused of doing it when Ireland won the Six Nations, and I said something about having thrown punches with Katie and run laps with Sonia, and I'd never written that down, and everybody thought I'd scripted it and thought it was over the top in terms of it being scripted, which I didn't do.
Well, look at Marty Morrissey. I don't know if anybody watched the coverage of the Wild Geese International tournament at the weekend, but Jesus Christ, you'd swear it was an All-Ireland final.
Yeah.
That's I mean, everybody has their own way of doing it. My view is I would never write it down. You got to feel it, and if you feel it, it'll come naturally. And whether that's good, whether it's a good performance or a bad performance. So the Tommy Bowe thing, I was out of the box. I was in fifth gear, and I had nothing else but go. And how it came, and he had a vowel at the end of his name, so it just came. I mean, had it been Stockdale, I'm not sure I would have done the same.
Let's see how well you remember. So, I mean, this is an obvious question, but who gave him the pass that put him through?
Pass was a kick through from Rohan O'Gara.
Who was the tackle that was sent flying in Tommy's path as he was running through? Do you remember?
Shane Williams, was it?
No, Gavin Henson.
Was it? Oh, that's right. Gavin Henson sort of did a goalkeeper's dive.
Yeah, and I just because there's just an iconic image of Tommy powering through and Gavin just going flying from behind them.
So I don't know whether Tommy. This is true. I met Tommy Bowe for the first time after he retired.
What?
Wow. Seriously?
No
Because I was going to
way.
ask him, have you ever talked about this moment?
Tommy and I so I would have seen him at camps and at but in terms of standing and having a conversation with the man, and I was actually a little afraid of him because I thought, like, it became this thing, and then I won't lie, after that one, which was an accident, the first one, I then hammed it up.
Yeah, of course, you have to.
So let's not pretend otherwise. So every time Tommy went in, I went...
You have to give Mario Rosenstock his material.
Yeah. So I gave...
Creating employment across the Irish.
Exactly. But I was pretty sure that I'd make Tommy's life a living hell because everywhere he went, Tommy Bowe! Like, that's funny for a week or a month, but if you're walking down at home in Monaghan, or you're like walking down Grafton Street holding your girlfriend's hand, or going shopping with your dad or your mum, or, like, the last thing you need is a whole load of Aegis shouting, Tommy Bowe!
Ryan, speaking of favourite games, of course the Grand Slam victory. Do you have any other favourite games?
I guess the first one that stands out. Like, I have two other favourite games, three other favourite games.
Yeah, I from what I had read in my research, without beating what you were going to say, I'm fairly sure from what I read there was going to be another edition from the last year or two. Yeah, no, I would say my favourite games are, and they're for my own personal reasons, were definitely the Grand Slam game where Ireland won. That's a no-brainer.
Of course.
I think the Croke Park game with England because that was just such a. I think people will look back at that and realise more and more and more what a part of history we got to literally live through. I think, and I don't want to overstate it, but you've got to remember what was running into that and what people were worried about, and it was just the most magnificent occasion. I loved the Munster win in 2006 because in the Millennium Stadium, because I think it laid the foundation for the success of Irish rugby over the last 10, 11, 12 years, and it was the foundation, and they had tried so many times, and they'd been beaten and they were close, and and they'd lost it, and then they finally scaled the mountain, and that was wonderful to be at. And then my own little box ticking exercise was to do a World Cup final in Eden Park in Auckland when New Zealand won the World Cup in their own backyard against France, and that one had just a moment. I guess anybody that's in journalism or in broadcasting, a World Cup final, and it's like, I think Brazil playing in Brazil, New Zealand playing in New Zealand. Yeah. Like, I've loved the game my whole life, and the thought of actually getting to commentate on New Zealand in a World Cup final in Auckland, I was like, right, okay, shoot me now. You know, like, that's it. That's that box. If you had been that way inclined as a child, I'm sure that would have been the one. World Cup final here, you know, exactly. That would have been the one that you would. Yeah. So they'd be my top four games.
You mentioned Ralph as being your co-commentator for your first game, and obviously you've been a bit of a pair over the years. Yeah. How much has him being beside you helped you to be comfortable in the box?
He's been brilliant. Ralph has been brilliant. I think what people forget about Ralph is Ralph Keyes was the Golden Boot winner at the Rugby World Cup in 1991. He scored more points in the Rugby World Cup than anybody else, and he may have only played, I can't remember exactly how many caps Ralph is. I'm going to say 12 or 14 caps for Ireland, at a time where caps weren't plentiful. They were only 4 or 5, 6 matches a year. And he came under competition from a guy called Brian Smith, who was the first of the kind of wild geese. He was a guy who was born in Australia and declared for Ireland, and there was war about it at the time. And he probably won 15, my memory isn't great on it, he probably won 10 or 15 caps that Ralph would have won if Brian hadn't been there. That whole argument's a different argument, but Ralph was a rarity in that he was utterly comfortable doing the job but never sought the limelight, and loved doing the job, and he was great to me. He was outstanding to me, and we forged a great old partnership through the years, and I was lucky to do the same with Donal Lenihan in the last 5 or 6 years, and they've both been great. Two guys I cannot speak highly enough.
Does it help then working so closely and so often with somebody in terms of building a dynamic on commentary and stuff like that, a rapport? It helps.
I was having that conversation with Jamie Heaslip only recently, which is, like, he's new to it. I think co-commentator is the hardest game in sports broadcasting. So I think it's harder than the guys in the studio. I think it's harder than presenting. I think it's harder than commentating. I think it's harder than analysts. I think it's harder than journalism. And I'll tell you why. Because a good co-commentator is going to make the call, and they have to make it right there and then. So think about something happening, and they have to contextualize it, explain it, and give it a sense of importance or not importance in a split second. Whereas the guys and girls in the studio have time to consider it. They can talk to each other.
They see replay.
They see replay. And now the co-commentators see the replay and that, but they
in the initial moment,
they have an initial moment to say red card, not red card, try, no try, good play, bad play, defensive collapse, not defensive collapse. Like, it is a really, really hard job, and more often than not, in fact, in all cases, they're not trained. It's innate in their ability to do it, and there are not a lot of good ones there. And I was just saying to Jamie, like, it is the hardest job, and most, when they go into it, kind of realize it pretty quick that they'd rather be in the studio, or they'd rather be down on the sideline, or they'd rather be anywhere else than in the co-commentator's chair. And Jamie's a rare, very rare breed. He loves it, loves it. He loves the immediacy of it. So he said to me, like, I would rather be there, I think, than in studio. And he's only early into it, so we'll see how it goes. But that's the first thing, and then it is about building a rapport, and that can only be done over time. But I'm afraid those days for everybody are fewer and further between, because the rights are moving around so much that you don't have 6, 8, 7, 9, 10 seasons where you have a commentary team doing the November Internationals, the Six Nations, the World Cup, the Heineken Cup all together, and that's where that rapport builds up. Now you kind of got to force it a bit more.
Well, yourself and Jamie did,
We were lucky, it was great, and that was down to him.
And apart from that, though, you announced your resignation the same day that Jamie retired as well. So this little bromance, this has been
it was there.
Bit of momentum now.
It was there from day one. No, but look, it was our first game together, and I'm looking forward to doing the second game, which is fab.
Speaking of the game on Saturday, what are your thoughts? What's going to happen?
What are my thoughts?
Actually, I do have a question from a friend, Dylan. I did ask him, because our friend Dylan is very much rugby inclined.
Excellent.
So I just asked him, I'm interviewing Ryle Nugent today, what do you want to ask him? He wants your opinion, who should start fullback for Ireland?
Rob Kearney. No question for me. I mean, I think Jordan Larmour is going to be, and is already, a superstar. I think what you're talking about here, in my head, there are 4 different levels. There's first this professional level of being able to play, which is Pro 14, week in, week out. Then you step up to the second level, which is Heineken Cup, and being able to operate at that level. The third level is international, and that's another level entirely. And then I think there's a 4th level, which is at the very, very top of international, which is games against the All Blacks, quarter or semi-finals in World Cups, like A+ grade. And Jordan's 21, and he's been fast-tracked, and he's magnificent, but experience counts in all walks of life at different points. And I think coming up against the world #1 team at this moment in time, Rob Kearney's the man for the job. Will he be in a year's time? Don't know. But this Saturday, Rob Kearney every time.
Sorry,
every time.
You were going to say?
Yeah, just any predictions for the game?
I think it's going to be a 1-score game. I hope it's going to be a 1-score game, and I think that means again, I'm a firm believer in destiny and a little bit of luck, and you need a bit of luck on these. So Ireland, like, if Wayne Bard sees an offside that mightn't be given any other day, and you get a penalty and you get an easy 3 points, that could be the difference, So, but if you my way of answering these is, if somebody put a gun to your head and said if you get it wrong, you're gone, then I unfortunately would have to favour New Zealand. But I won't be surprised if Ireland wins this game.
So it's the classic head says New Zealand, heart says Ireland.
Yeah, but your heart always says your own country,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Unless you're a cold-hearted bastard.
Will we talk a little bit about head of sport then?
Yeah.
If you didn't know, Greg is our own head of sport for DCUFM.
Excellent.
And I'm his deputy.
This is my deputy
And
here.
the burden is great.
Yeah, I feel this weight on my shoulders. Now, I think yours and mine might be slightly. in terms of
DCUFM is above
above
RTÉ.
Ryle, you moved into the deputy head of sport in 2006 with RTÉ.
Yeah, she did 6-7, yeah.
And then then you obviously then progressed. You took over from
Glenn
Killeen, and he moved into the MD of TV. But so you moved into a role, and like for people who might know, group head of sport for RTÉ. So like you're directly responsible for basically sport on RTÉ, and that's that's TV, that's radio, publishing, everything.
Yeah.
So like it's you have to have a base in a bit of everything, I suppose. And
so the job is twofold. It's got two levels to it. It is the business side of it, which is the rights negotiations. Excuse me. Which is the rights negotiations, a certain amount of commercial responsibility, but that's handled by the commercial department, but you're working with them on that. And then the contracts for all the staff and all the talent. And then let's call that the commercial business side of it. And then on the flip side of that is the editorial, which is all of the output on TV, radio, digital, is your responsibility. Now that's in theory. The fact of the matter is you deal with the major stuff as it needs to be dealt with day to day. You're not doing that. So the way that RTÉ is structured is you have a group head of sport, and then you have 3 heads underneath. There are actually 5 on the management team, but there are 3 heads underneath. One with responsibility for television, Cian O'Leary. One with responsibility for radio, Donald McGrath. One with responsibility for digital, Mikey Stafford. And then there's a commissioning editor, Paula Fahey, who deals with all of the documentaries that are bought or made from outside.
You've held that position yourself.
I did, yeah, before that. And then there's a financial person involved with you as well. So there's a management team. So yes, you have responsibility for all of it, but it's like the further you go up the food chain, the more you're relying on other people to do their jobs in order.
Delegation is
and you get brought in to do it. Of course, ultimately it is your responsibility, and ultimately it is the head of sport's responsibility to make sure everything is the way it should be. And if there are major issues like call a spade. If Joe Brolly or Eamon Dunphy said anything or did anything, then that was my bag. And if there were issues on legal or anything like that they were mine. But the day to day, like what story is going to run as the lead on digital, that's on the website. That's the guys and girls that work there need to make those decisions. So look, it was I ended up in it by, again, a bit of default and a bit of accident. I kind of realised when I wanted to be on air as either a presenter or a commentator that I was only going to fulfil a certain amount. It is also it's also a brutal business, and it's becoming more brutal. You're only as good as your last gig. And I kind of thought, if that doesn't work out, what else are you going to do here? You better have another side to your career developed. So I was lucky enough to be able to commentate or present at the weekends, and then during the week I started to produce stuff. So I was the editor of the 2002 World Cup when the whole Saipan thing happened, and it was the middle of the night, and Eamon Dunphy had a moment in studio, and
he's prone to a couple of those over the years.
I was the head of our rugby coverage for a while, and I was the editor of Sunday Game for a short period, so I kind of had all that editorial experience coming behind me. And then the business side of it, I was lucky that Glenn, when he was the head of sport, gave me an opportunity to work on some rights stuff. So
and that obviously
natural
became
progression for me, it felt like natural.
The rights obviously became quite a big.
It's huge.
Huge
area.
It
is the job. And truthfully, it is the job.
It is, and I suppose, and like when I was doing my research during the week and stuff, and I didn't know you personally, but I felt that a lot of the kind of the stick you were getting for the likes of the,
sure,
it's very unfair, because if you look at it logically, RTÉ is the state broadcaster, and obviously you don't have a budget that can compare to, but yet the personal
and you're very and look, I appreciate you saying it, but I like I said to you earlier, I think if you're being the head of sport in RTÉ and having a front-facing job at the same time in terms of the broadcasting made what was already a public job even more public for me. And I knew that going into it, and you just accept that. People are entitled, like RTÉ Sport I presided over a portfolio of programming that I firmly believed in, which was people offering an opinion on what was happening in front of them. Now, people are entitled to that opinion. There is a line when you cross it and it becomes personal criticism rather than professional criticism. And people crossed the line with me about it being like I sat in my office and went, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to not do the National League in GAA because I just don't like it. Give me a break.
I'm from the south side.
That was just absolute nonsense. And then it became some people, but there's always idiots on Twitter and there's always idiots on Facebook. And I frankly, I'm not going to teach my son to ignore people being idiots when they're being idiots and not accept that myself. So you accept when you go into a job like that, and if you're going to have a profile, that you're going to get kicked around a bit. And I genuinely didn't lose a huge amount of sleep. I won't lie. Yeah. There were occasions where I did go home and go, actually, I can't be doing this anymore. This is just nonsense. But in terms of the job with the rights, and look, it is the job. Like the rights for the sports department in RTÉ is a crucial part of it, and it is a very demanding job. These are facts. This isn't a complaint. Like it is 24/7, and you get called on holidays, and you're on pretty much all the time. And that was one of the reasons that I chose to leave. Like you in my humble opinion, 6-8 years of that, going 7 days a week all the time. Of course, I went on holiday, but you were
more
you had to be on it.
Any person.
Yeah, you get to a point where you go, okay. It's time to change. And also, I think the people in the department needed to hear a fresh voice. They were bored listening to me, and I don't blame them. And they needed a fresh voice and a fresh direction. And the guy that they have in Declan McBennett is a fresh voice and a fresh direction. And I have a huge amount of time for Declan.
Declan McBennett. this is my little tidbit of the day. He is a one-time Monaghan Junior Footballer of the Year.
He is.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
He is. Yeah.
What did I tell you? Investigative journalism.
I tell you at the top.
That one was my favourite.
No, Declan, very good, well done. Declan's a good guy, and he will have no more of a pro-GA stance than I had a pro-rugby stance. His job is to go in and do the very best he can and have a portfolio of rights that are available to the Irish public. And that, like, I used to laugh, people saying, it's just completely rugby. Like, I lost the Rugby World Cup, I lost the Six Nations, I lost the Heineken Cup, and I lost the Pro 14. Like, what part of that adds up to genius rugby pusher?
Looking after him. Yeah, I did. When I was doing my research, I laughed at it because I was like, look, whatever argument can, and I can make a very I can give out to you plenty about Leish's coverage over the last couple of years, but at the same time, it's not as if he said, you know what, them rugby lads, they're my boys, I'm going to look after,
It's such a competitive industry. There's competition there now where there wasn't before, and it's not just Irish competition, there's competition from the UK, and there's competition from digital players. Like if Amazon and Facebook and these guys come to the market in a meaningful way, well, then the whole landscape's going to change, and all of a sudden the Skies and the BTs are going to look like the poor kids in the room, and they're not going to have the money to do everything. But even they are not doing what they were doing at one point, So the mighty Sky, which is they have done a fantastic job over the years. They have the Premier League, but they don't have the Six Nations, and they don't have the Olympic Games, and they don't have the World Cup, and they don't have the Champions League.
And they're starting to lose the Premier League.
So more and more so, yeah.
So like
they just lost the league this year actually as well.
But what has happened is people are comparing 2017 with 2007 or 1997 when RTÉ had everything. Well, RTÉ had everything in 1997 because there was nobody else.
There was no competition.
Yeah. So like it's just a nonsensical argument. And every industry that I'm aware of, every business moves forward, and every business has moved forward and has changed. You don't go into any business from 1997 to 2017 that hasn't fundamentally changed, because if it hasn't fundamentally changed, it's gone. So that argument of RTÉ should have everything is a nonsensical argument, and it's pretty lazy comment in my view from people who should know better in some cases. You should know better.
In your position, like when you are a head of sport, I think you have to tell yourself, I'm head of sport for a reason. Like John 34 from Sligo is John 34 from Sligo for a reason. He's not in the position I am. He doesn't have to make the decisions that I have to make. Yeah. They don't understand the nuances of the job. So in that sense, you kind of have to just brush off anything.
You do, but you're also, I think there is something here, and I do want to say this because I think it's important for it to be said. It is a different job to being the head of sport in TV3 or Virgin Media as they are now, or being the head of sport in Sky, or being the head of sport in BT. Because you are dealing with public money, and you are answerable, and it is important that you're answerable and accountable, and you do have to explain your decisions, and you are open to criticism, and I have no problem with that. The only problem I have is when the arguments that are made don't add up to any logic anywhere. then you're kind of going, well, I can't. You're just not going to accept. You don't have to like the decision. You do have to respect that there was a process put in place to make the decision. Yeah. And if there wasn't, then the scrutiny is valid. Then the criticism is valid. So I don't have a problem with all that stuff. That goes with the job, and it's right that RTÉ are held accountable for the decisions that they make when they're dealing with public money, as any public money should be held accountable.
It's been quite a serious discussion, so we've really touched on some serious topics. So we'll move into the lighter side of the as we wrap up here. So, Greg, do you want to do a little bit of
well, we know the answer to our first usual question: tea or coffee? Because Ryle actually bought me my coffee today.
That is beautiful. If I'd stuck around longer, you
would have got a coffee too.
No, I doubt it. It was just me. So, Ryle, you had a cappuccino, was it?
I didn't. No, I had an Americano.
Oh, did you?
Does that tell you something about me?
Yeah. Do you take sugar?
Yes.
How many?
One.
Yeah, same as myself.
Milk, definitely. Full fat.
Okay. Ryle, your ideal Saturday night, everything is within your control. You completely dictate. What do you want to do?
Ooh. The Ryles today with 2 5-year-old girls and a 16-year-old boy versus the Ryle of 20 years ago.
You can give a bit of both to me, like.
You can.
I look. It comes to us all. We all begin to settle down and slow down. I love a few pints, no doubt about it. And I'm going to sound like a complete sap now, but I don't mind saying it. I love going out with my missus, and it would be go sit in the corner and like I love O'Donoghue's pub in Marion Row in town, and I love just going in and sitting down and having a pint and having that 3 or 4 hours where you
drinking pints of.
Pints of.
And you're going to be. I'm Smithwick's actually.
Smithwick's.
Oh,
a man after Gavin's own heart. Yeah.
There you go.
I was really expecting you to say a point of Ken.
See, bin those stereotypes during this.
I thought Ryle would be a Guinness. I had you pegged as a Guinness.
I like a pint of Guinness.
Yeah, myself and Greg.
Smithwick's would be my default.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that, and I love going for it, and I love a steak, and then the best thing you could give me is the girls not waking up till 9.
A bit of a lie in the next morning. Yeah.
Ryle, favourite music and favourite movie?
Favourite music and favourite movie. Wow, lads, I wish I'd known this was coming. Favourite music and favourite movie. I think if I had 2 albums completely, this is really weird. I've never said this out loud. I'm not a big music buff. I don't really like concerts. I like listening to music, but I'm not a concert goer. Don't like them. 2 albums that I keep going back to over and over and over again. Donald Fagen, Firefly, and this is going to sound really odd. The 4 of Us, Songs from the Big Chair. I think it's no, it's not Songs from the Big Chair. 4 of Us. It's that was Tears for Fears back in the 90s. 4 of Us. What is it? What was the 4 of Us album? There was one huge album, and I can't have it on my phone.
Yeah.
But Donald Fagen is the one I would go back to over and over again. And my favourite movie. Do I really have a favourite movie? Do I have one that will make
Mine
me...
is very cliche. It's Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, you see, I was going to say that, but is there a movie that I would go back to over and over and over again? No, I'll tell you what I've absolutely loved. House of Cards straight through.
Yeah, big fan.
On the latest season?
Yeah, as soon as it was out, I binged it in one go.
Did you enjoy the latest season?
No.
Yeah.
That's fairly. The first 4 episodes were all over the place, and then it kind of redeemed itself in the last 2 or 3, and then I didn't like the last one.
They were put in a tricky situation. There was going to be no good way to wrap up that series.
Yeah. No, I liked Ozark. Really enjoyed Ozark.
Yeah.
Kind of dark.
Yeah.
But enjoyed that. So that's my kind of.
How do you feel about the All or Nothing documentary? The series.
I haven't seen it.
Any of them?
No, not yet.
Oh, wow.
Not yet. It's on my list.
You've got to do that.
Yeah,
I watched the first episode. It was very good.
Which one?
The Lions one.
Oh yeah.
And I watched all of the Man City one.
Oh, the Man City one.
I have it, and it's one of those that I know I need to sit down, because once I watch it, it's going to just.
The All Blacks one is great.
I'm going to have to keep watching them, and I haven't watched them.
Right, we understand that Ryle's a bit stuff for time, so Gav will as we traditionally end.
Traditionally, any advice that you can pass on to students or whoever, or either, the best advice you've ever been given.
So I'll say 2 things to that. The best advice I was ever given as a commentator, and I've recounted this story before, was when I came in after as being reporter on the sideline for Ulster winning the Heineken Cup in 1999 in Lansdowne Road, and the English teams hadn't been in the competition. And I interviewed Ulster. It was a wonderful day in Lansdowne Road. It was a seismic day, and they had done a phenomenal job. And the boss took me in the next day and told me I was awful. And I was really taken aback. And he said, "You were up here. You were so engage. And he said, what's the biggest thing that can happen in Irish rugby? And I said, win the World Cup. And he said, okay, what's the second biggest thing? And I said, Ireland win the Six Nations. And he went, okay, well, what's the third biggest thing? And we worked through it, and I had Ulster winning the Heineken Cup without the English teams in it, maybe is the 14th biggest thing that can happen. And he said, well, where are you going to go when something really big happens? And I thought, you know what, I hated hearing it, but he was dead right. So where I went with the Tommy Bowe and Grand Slam at stake, drop goal for O'Gara, that was, I don't think I have any more room after that for a World Cup final. I'll find it, but that was me at absolute peak. And everything has got to be a step underneath that for me. Only a little step, but so what I'm saying is, if you're going to get involved in sports journalism, if what the message was is contextualize what you're seeing, contextualize what you're doing. Don't, just because you get an opportunity and something significant, huge happens in front of you, remember there's going to be bigger days, likely going to be bigger days, unless it's Ireland winning the World Cup, or unless that's your starting point, or unless you're Ireland winning the Six Nations, that's your starting point, or your All Ireland final, where the Dubs do 12 in a row.
That actually sounds quite like
you know, that that's the pinnacle of your sport. So everything else underneath it, be careful that you don't go OTT. The best piece of advice I can give you is, don't let anybody dissuade you. Don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't do it. Don't let anybody tell you that it's too difficult to do. If sports journalism is where you want to be, then keep going and keep going and keep going, and find your niche and find your way, and find people that will believe in you, and take your opportunities when they come, and don't ever think you have it cracked, because you don't. I every time, like, I'm going into this game this weekend, and there's no sense of me thinking, I just need to rock up here. This is like,
there's no resting on your laurels.
You do your work and make sure you do it. And if you have a bad day at the office, and we all have them, put it in context, realize it was a bad day at the office. The one thing I will say about sports journalism and broadcasting in particular, if you have a bad day at the office, the difference between that and somebody who actually works in an office or in a different environment is that really the only people that know they had a bad day is you, your boss, and probably your family when you go home. If you or I have a bad day at the office, chances are a million people are going to know I had a bad day at the office. And you need to just realize you're entitled to have a bad day at the office. You can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go back out again. And if you have a great day at the office, and a million people think you've had a great day at the office, realize it was one day at the office. And don't let yourself get carried away with it. But the best piece of advice I would say to you is, it's a wonderful, wonderful way to earn a living if you can do that. And if it's your dream and it's what you want to do, don't let anybody dissuade you.
Well, brilliant. I don't think we could have summed it up any better ourselves, right? Thank you very, very much
my
for
pleasure,
coming out to see you today.
Absolute pleasure.
We're very delighted that you came out, and I feel like I've definitely learned some stuff, and I think the boys are the same.
100%.
This has been In Conversation with Ryle Nugent. Thank you for listening.